The wagon rattled over frozen ground, each jolt sending pain through Lena's already bruised ribs. She didn't look at the man driving. Hadn't looked at him since they'd left the trading post 3 hours ago. The man who was legally, impossibly, her husband now. Jace called her. She'd heard the name twice. Once when the land baron's enforcer had shoved the papers across the table at her, and once when the clerk had mumbled through the ceremony that wasn't really a ceremony at all, just signatures. Witnesses who didn't care. A transaction dressed up with legal words. The landscape was brutal. Miles of white nothing, broken only by skeletal trees and the occasional carcass of something that hadn't made it through the last storm. The wind cut through her thin coat like it was made of paper. She'd sold her good coat 2 months ago, before everything fell apart, before her father's final catastrophic bet. "Another hour," Jace said. His voice was rough, unused. She glanced at him sideways. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 30, maybe less. Hard to tell with the beard and the way his face was weathered like old leather. His hands on the reins were scarred, one finger bent at an odd angle that had healed wrong. Lena didn't answer. What was there to say? Thank you for the information about how long until we reach the prison I'll be living in. The silence stretched. She was good at silence. Had learned it young, growing up in a house where speaking up earned you the back of a hand. Her father had been a charmer in public, a tyrant at home. His gambling had started small, cards, horses, dice. Then it grew, and grew, until he was betting things he didn't own, things he couldn't pay. Things like her. "It's not much," Jace said suddenly. "The place. Don't want you thinking it's something it's not." "I'm not thinking anything." "Good." More silence. The wind howled. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf called. Or maybe it was just the wind. Out here, it was hard to tell the difference between living things and the sounds of dying. The cabin appeared like a wound in the landscape, a dark, sagging structure that looked one bad storm away from collapse. The roof had a visible hole on the left side, patched with what looked like old canvas that was already tearing. The windows were mostly intact, but one was boarded over with planks that didn't match. Jace pulled the wagon to a stop near what might have been a barn. Might have been. The structure was leaning so badly it looked drunk. "Home," he said. The word was bitter. Lena climbed down before he could offer help. Her legs nearly buckled. 3 hours sitting in the cold had locked her joints. She steadied herself against the wagon, refusing to show weakness. Not now. Not in front of him. Jace unhitched the horse without looking at her. The animal was thin, ribs showing through its rough coat. Everything here looked half-starved. The cabin door stuck when he pushed it. He had to shoulder it hard before it gave way with a crack that sounded like breaking bones. Inside was worse than outside. One room, dirt floor. A stone fireplace that was more cracked than stone, a table with 3 legs, the fourth corner propped on a stack of books, 2 chairs that didn't match, and a bed in the corner that was just a wooden frame with a mattress that looked like it was stuffed with straw and hope. "I'll sleep in the barn," Jace said. He wouldn't look at her. "You take the bed." Lena surveyed the space. There was a pot-bellied stove near the fireplace, rusty and old. A few dishes stacked on a shelf. A bucket by the door, frozen solid with old water. The cold inside wasn't much better than the cold outside. "There's no food," she said. It wasn't a question. Jace's jaw tightened. "Some, not much. Been a hard winter." "It's only December." "Yeah." The full weight of it hit her then. Not the arranged marriage part. She'd had 3 days to absorb that horror. But the reality of where she was. What this was. This wasn't poverty like she'd known in the city, where you could beg or steal or sell things. This was frontier poverty, the kind where you could do everything right and still freeze to death because the land didn't care about effort. "The land baron," she said. "Garrick Voss. What do you owe him?" Jace finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, exhausted. "More than I can pay." "How much?" "Why does it matter?" "Because I need to know what I'm worth in this equation." Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or shame. $3,000, plus interest. Compounds monthly. Lena felt the number like a physical blow. $3,000. Her father's debt to Voss had been $800, which meant she'd been traded at a significant discount. Voss had bundled her into Jace's debt, killed two birds with one stone, got rid of her father's unpaid gambling tab, and tightened the noose on Jace at the same time. When's it due? Spring, April 1st. 4 months. They had 4 months to somehow produce $3,000 plus interest on a homestead that clearly produced nothing. "We're going to die here," Lena said. Jace turned away, started building a fire in the fireplace with hands that shook slightly. Not from cold, from something else. "Probably," he agreed. The first night, Lena didn't sleep. The cabin was too cold, too dark, too full of sounds she didn't recognize. Animals outside, maybe. The wind. The structure itself settling and creaking like it was alive. Jace had gone to the barn as promised. She'd watched him through the gap in the boards, carrying a single blanket, his shoulders hunched against the wind. Part of her felt guilty. Part of her didn't care. She hadn't asked for this. Hadn't asked for any of it. She got up before dawn and surveyed her resources by candlelight. It was grim. Food. Maybe 10 pounds of flour in a sack. Some dried beans, hard as rocks. A few potatoes already sprouting. Some salt. That was it. Tools. An axe, blade dull. A rusty saw. Some rope. A hammer with a loose head. A bucket with a hole in it. Clothing. What she was wearing. What Jace was wearing. Maybe one extra shirt she'd found hanging on a nail. Firewood, a small stack near the fireplace. Maybe 3 days' worth, if they were careful. Water. A well outside, but the rope was frayed and the bucket situation was a problem. She made a list in her head. Priorities. Fix the bucket. Get water. Ration food. Find more firewood. Patch the roof before the next snow. When Jace came in at sunrise, she was already dressed, hair tied back, trying to figure out how to patch the bucket with a piece of canvas and some of the rope. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. "You're up. We need water." "I know." "The bucket has a hole." "I know. So I'm fixing it." He watched her work for a moment. She could feel his eyes on her, assessing, trying to figure out what kind of person Voss had dumped on him. "There's pine tar in the barn," he said finally. "Seal it. Better than rope." "Show me." They worked in silence. Jace brought the tar, thick and sticky and smelling like turpentine. Lena smeared it over the canvas patch, working it into the wood grain. Her fingers went black with the stuff. It didn't matter. "You know how to do anything?" Jace asked. Not unkind, just curious. "I can sew, cook, if there's something to cook, clean. I worked in a laundry for 2 years. "Can you shoot?" "No." "I'll teach you." She looked up at him. His face was unreadable. "Why?" "Because if something happens to me, you'll need to." The practicality of it was almost worse than cruelty would have been. He wasn't planning for a future. He was planning for his own death. "What happened to you?" Lena asked. Jace's expression closed. "Same thing that happened to you. Bad luck and worse choices." He left before she could ask more. The days developed a rhythm. Wake before dawn. Check the fire. Ration breakfast. Usually just weak coffee and a handful of beans if they were lucky. Jace would go check the traps he'd set for rabbits. Lena would work on the cabin, patching, cleaning, organizing what little they had. Most days, the traps were empty. "The game's moved on," Jace explained one night. They were sitting by the fireplace, the only warm spot in the whole cabin. "Used to be deer everywhere, rabbits. Even saw an elk herd once. But the land's dying. Whatever Voss is doing on his property, it's driving everything away." "What is he doing?" "Don't know. Don't want to know. Man's got 50 men working for him. Private army, basically. You don't ask questions about what Garrick Voss does." Lena poked at the fire. "He's the one you owe." "Yeah." "How'd it happen?" Jace was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My father, he borrowed to buy this land. 200 acres. Was supposed to be good grazing. And it was, for a while. But he borrowed from Voss, and Voss doesn't do straight loans. There's always something else. Contract said if we missed a payment, the interest would double. We missed one payment. Just one. Bad winter. Lost half the herd. After that," he gestured vaguely. "Couldn't catch up. My father broke his back trying. Literally. Fell off the barn roof trying to patch it during a storm. Broke his spine. Died 2 months later." "I'm sorry." Don't be. He knew what he was signing. I was just stupid enough to think I could make it work after he was gone. Jace laughed, but it was ugly. Voss gave me 2 years. I made it 18 months before he started sending collectors. Then he offered me a deal. Take on another debt, get some time. I was desperate enough to say yes. I was the other debt. Yeah. Lena stared into the fire. My father was a gambler, cards mostly. He was good for a while, then he wasn't, started losing. Kept betting, thinking he'd win it back. Never did. He owed money all over the city, but Voss was the one who finally called it in, said he'd forgive the debt if… She couldn't finish. If he gave him you? Yes. That's not forgiveness. That's slavery. I know. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. We could run, Lena said quietly. Jace shook his head. Where? You think Voss doesn't have people everywhere? We'd make it maybe 50 miles before someone turned us in for the bounty, and then it'd be worse than this. Hard to imagine worse than this. Use your imagination harder. She wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd seen what happened to people who crossed men like Voss. Her father had friends, former friends, who tried to skip on debts. They'd been found, made examples of. The kind of examples that kept other people in line. So we just wait to die, Lena said. We try to survive until spring. Then maybe we figure something out. There's nothing to figure out. You said it yourself. You can't pay. I said I can't pay what I owe. Didn't say I couldn't pay something. Voss doesn't seem like a negotiating type. He's not. But he's a businessman. He wants something from this land. I know he does. Why else keep pressure on me? He could have taken it a year ago. But he's waiting. Waiting for what? That's what I need to figure out. The first real storm hit on a Tuesday. Lena had been there 11 days. The wind came first, howling like something alive. Then the snow, thick and fast, turning the world white in minutes. The temperature dropped so fast the water in the bucket froze while she watched. Jace had been out checking the traps. When he came back, he was covered in snow, face red from the cold. We need to seal the windows better, he said, already moving. This one's going to be bad. They worked fast. Stuffed rags in the gaps around the windows, nailed blankets over the worst drafts, built up the fire as high as they dared without wasting too much wood. By nightfall, the storm was a full blizzard. The wind was so loud they had to shout to hear each other. Snow came through cracks they didn't even know existed, creating small drifts inside the cabin. The barn, Lena said suddenly. The horse. Jace's face went tight. Can't get to him. Not in this. He'll freeze. I know. So we just let him die? You got a better idea? I go out there, I won't make it back. Then we're both dead and the horse dies anyway. Lena grabbed her coat. What are you doing? Jace demanded. There's rope in the corner. We tie it to the door. I follow it to the barn, lead the horse back. That's insane. You have a better idea? Yeah, we stay inside and live. And lose our only horse. Then what? How do we get anywhere? How do we haul anything? We need that animal. Jace stared at her. You'll die out there. Then I'll die doing something useful. She didn't wait for permission. Grabbed the rope, started tying one end to the door handle. Jace watched for a moment, then cursed and started helping. I'll go, he said. No, you know this land. If something happens to me, you can still survive. If something happens to you, I'm dead anyway. Jesus Christ, Jace muttered. But he didn't stop her. They tied the rope secure. Lena wrapped a scarf around her face, pulled her coat tight. Jace grabbed her arm before she opened the door. Follow the rope. Don't let go. If you get turned around, pull twice. I'll pull back. 3 pulls means come back now. Got it. Lena. He said her name like he was tasting it for the first time. Don't be stupid out there. Too late for that. She opened the door and the storm tried to rip it off its hinges. The wind was a physical force pushing her back. Snow blinded her instantly. She couldn't see 2 feet in front of her face, but she could feel the rope. Hand over hand, she moved forward. Each step was a battle. The wind kept trying to knock her down. Snow filled her mouth when she tried to breathe. The cold was so intense it felt like burning. The barn was maybe 40 yards from the cabin. It felt like miles. Her hands were numb on the rope. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. The world was just white noise and white snow and cold that went bone deep. Then her outstretched hand hit wood. The barn. She felt along the wall until she found the door. It was frozen shut. She kicked it, once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th kick it gave way and she stumbled inside. The horse was in the corner, shaking. Steam rose from its body. It was still alive, but barely. "Come on," Lena said through numb lips. "Come on. We're getting you out of here." The horse didn't want to move. Didn't want to go out into the storm. She didn't blame it, but she grabbed its halter and pulled, using every ounce of strength she had. "Move, damn you!" Maybe it was her tone. Maybe it was instinct. The horse took a step, then another. Getting back was worse than getting there. The horse balked at the door, terrified of the storm. Lena had to pull and push and scream at it until finally it burst out into the blizzard. She kept one hand on the rope, one hand on the halter. Moved step by step. The world disappeared. There was only the rope, the horse, the cold. Her hand hit the cabin door so hard she split her knuckle on the wood. Jace pulled her inside, horse and all. They got the animal in and slammed the door shut. Lena collapsed on the floor, gasping. "You're insane," Jace said. But he was already moving, getting a blanket for the horse, another for Lena. Completely insane. Lena's teeth were chattering too hard to answer. They spent that night in the cabin, all 3 of them. The horse stood near the fireplace, still shaking. Lena sat wrapped in every blanket they had, slowly thawing. Jace kept the fire going, kept checking on both of them. "Why'd you do it?" he asked around midnight. "Told you, we need the horse." "That's not why." Lena was quiet for a long time. "My whole life, people have made choices for me. Where I lived, what I did, who I married. I'm tired of having no say. That horse was going to die because of a storm we couldn't control. But I could control whether I tried to save it or not. So I did." Jace nodded slowly. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the dumbest. Can I be both?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Yeah, I guess you can." The storm lasted 3 days. By the time it ended, they'd burned through most of their firewood and half their food. The snow outside was 4 feet deep in places. The world was silent and white and dead. Jace went out first, breaking trail. Lena followed, trying to assess the damage. The barn's roof had partially collapsed. The well was completely buried. The canvas patch on the cabin roof had torn away, and snow had piled up inside the cabin in one corner. "Could be worse," Jace said. "How?" "We could be dead." Fair point. They spent the next week digging out, shoveling paths to the well, to the barn around the cabin, trying to salvage what they could from the barn's collapse, patching the roof again. The work was endless and exhausting. Lena's hands blistered, then bled, then calloused. Her back ached constantly. She lost weight she didn't have to lose. But something shifted between them during those days. They learned to work together, learned each other's rhythms, when to push, when to rest, when to talk, when to stay quiet. One afternoon, while they were trying to fix the barn roof, Jace said, "You're tougher than you look." "I'm exactly as tough as I look." City girl who saves horses in blizzards, patches roofs, doesn't complain. I complain. "Not where I can hear you," Lena hammered in a nail. "Complaining doesn't fix anything. Most people do it anyway." "I'm not most people." "Yeah," Jace said quietly. "I'm starting to figure that out." January arrived with more cold and less food. The traps stayed empty. The game really was gone. They were down to quarter rations, stretching everything as far as it would go. Lena started making plans. Desperate plans. Dangerous plans. "Voss has supplies," she said one night. "Food, firewood, animals." "Yeah, and 50 men with guns." "I'm not saying we fight them. I'm saying we take what we need." Jace stared at her. "You want to steal from Garrick Voss?" "I want to survive." Same thing as suicide out here. We're dying anyway, slowly. At least this way we have a chance." "It's not a chance. It's a death sentence." Lena stood up, frustrated. "Then what? What's your plan? Because right now your plan seems to be sit here and starve quietly." Jace's jaw clenched. I'm trying to keep us alive. By doing nothing? By not doing something stupid that gets us killed faster. They were shouting now. The first real fight. It had been building for weeks, all the tension and fear and exhaustion finally boiling over. I didn't ask for this, Lena yelled. I didn't ask to be sold to a stranger who's just waiting to die. You think I asked for this? Jace shot back. You think I wanted a wife I can't feed, a debt I can't pay, a life that's already over? The words hung between them, harsh, true. Lena turned away. I should have run. Yeah, well, you didn't. I still could. Go ahead, see how far you get. She whirled on him. Why do you care? You've made it clear I'm just another burden. I never said that. You didn't have to. Jace stood up, crossed the small space between them in 2 strides. For a second, Lena thought he might grab her, hit her. She braced for it. But he just stood there, breathing hard. I care, he said, voice rough, because despite everything, despite this whole goddamn nightmare, I don't want you to die. I don't want either of us to die. And yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry that we're in this situation. I'm angry that I can't fix it. I'm angry that Voss gets to play with people's lives like we're nothing. But I'm not angry at you. Lena felt something crack inside her chest. I don't want to die either. Then we figure it out, together. How? I don't know yet, but not by getting ourselves killed stealing from Voss. She wanted to argue more, wanted to push, but the exhaustion was too much. She sank back into her chair. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Me too. It was the first honest thing they'd shared, not plans or strategies or survival talk, just truth. I've been thinking, Jace said after a while, about what you said, about Voss having resources. You're right, he does. But there might be another way to get them. How? Work. Lena looked at him. You want to work for the man who's destroying us? I want information. Voss is planning something with this land, I know it. If I can figure out what, maybe we can use it. Maybe there's a way out we're not seeing. That's a long shot. Everything's a long shot at this point. She thought about it, weighed the options. What kind of work? He's always looking for hands, ranch work mostly. It'd mean being gone sometimes, days at a time maybe. Leaving me here alone. You saved a horse in a blizzard. I think you can handle a few days alone. Despite everything, Lena almost smiled. When would you start? Soon, before we get too weak to be useful. It was risky. Could be a trap. Could be a waste of time, but it was a plan, and a plan was better than nothing. Okay, Lena said. Do it. Jace left on a Tuesday morning in mid-January. He took the horse. It had recovered from the storm and was the only thing they had worth trading for work. Lena watched him ride away, a small figure growing smaller against the white landscape until he disappeared. Then she was alone. The first day was fine. She had projects, fixing things, organizing things, keeping busy. The second day was harder. The silence was too loud. Every sound made her jump. She caught herself listening for Jace's footsteps, his voice, the small sounds of another person existing. The third day, she started talking to herself. Just small things, narrating what she was doing. Need more water. Bucket's getting low. Okay, coat on. Scarf. Don't forget the scarf. The fourth day, the wind picked up and she spent the entire afternoon certain something was trying to get into the cabin. It was just the wind, probably, but every creak, every groan of the old wood made her reach for the axe. Jace came back on the fifth day, just after dawn. He looked exhausted, but he was carrying supplies, a sack of flour, some dried meat, even coffee. Lena didn't mean to, but when he walked through the door, she grabbed him in a hug. He went stiff with surprise, then slowly put his arms around her. You okay? He asked. 5 days alone in this place. What do you think? He actually laughed. A real laugh. It transformed his face, made him look younger. Yeah, it gets to you. She pulled back, embarrassed. Sorry, It's okay. He set down the supplies. I missed having someone to talk to, too. They made coffee, real coffee, hot and strong, and Jace told her about the work. Hard labor, mostly. Moving cattle, repairing fences, loading wagons, but he'd seen things, heard things. Voss is buying up land, Jace said. Everything he can get his hands on. Doesn't matter if it's good land or not. He wants it all. Why? That's the question. Some of the hands were talking. There's rumors of a railroad survey. Route might come through here. Lena felt a spark of something. Not quite hope, but close. If the railroad comes through, land value goes up, way up. Voss would make a fortune. But only if he owns the land. Exactly. So he's forcing people out. Like you. Like me. Lena thought fast. When's the survey supposed to happen? Spring, maybe. Nothing confirmed. But if it's true, Voss needs your land before then. Which means he needs you gone. Yeah. So we don't leave. Jace looked at her. If we don't pay, he takes it anyway. Not if we can prove what he's doing. If he's forcing people out through fraud, through illegal debt practices. Who's going to listen? Who's going to care? Territorial Governor's Office, Land Bureau, someone has to care. You're talking about taking on one of the most powerful men in the territory with nothing but speculation and rumors. You have a better idea? Jace was quiet, then, No, I don't. They spent the next month preparing. Jace kept taking work from Voss, gathering information, listening to every conversation he could. Lena started keeping records, dates, incidents, everything they knew about Voss's operations and the debt contracts. It wasn't much, but it was something. February was brutal. More storms, more cold, more days where they rationed food so carefully that hunger was just a constant background ache. But they were still alive, and they had a plan. One night, sitting by the fire, Jace said, "You know, when Voss first offered me this deal, I thought about saying no, just walking away, letting him take the land." "Why didn't you?" "Pride, mostly. This land was my father's, his dream. Felt like giving up on him." "It's not giving up to survive." "No, but it feels like it sometimes." He poked at the fire. "What about you? When your father made his deal, did you think about running?" "Every day, every hour." Lena pulled her blanket tighter. "But I had nowhere to go. No money, no skills anyone would pay for. And I was afraid." "Of what?" "That wherever I ran, I'd end up somewhere worse." "Is this worse?" She thought about it. Really thought. "No," she said finally. "This is hard. This is terrifying. But it's not worse. Because here I have a say, even if it's just a small one." Jace nodded. "When this is over, if we survive this, what do you want?" "I don't know. I've never really let myself want things." "Try." Lena stared into the fire. What did she want? Beyond survival, beyond escape, what would she choose if she could choose anything? "A garden," she said slowly. "I want to grow things. Food we can eat, flowers just because they're pretty. I want to wake up and not be scared. I want—" She hesitated. "I want to matter, not as somebody's property or somebody's debt, just as me." "You already matter." She looked at him, surprised. "You saved my horse," Jace said. "You survived a blizzard. You've kept us both going when I'd have given up weeks ago. You matter." Something warm spread through Lena's chest, not heat from the fire. Something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you want?" Jace was quiet for a long time. "I want this land to be what my father dreamed it could be. Green, growing, full of life. I want to build something that lasts, and I want—" He stopped. "What?" "I want to not be alone anymore." The words hung between them. Quiet, honest. Lena reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused from hard work. They closed around hers. "You're not alone," she said. "Neither are you." They sat like that until the fire burned low and the cold crept back in. Two people who'd been thrown away by the world, holding on to each other in the dark. Outside, the wind howled. The frontier was still brutal, still unforgiving. But inside, something was changing. Something was growing. March came in like a predator, silent, patient, deadly. The storms eased, but the cold didn't break. Ice still crusted the windows every morning, and the ground stayed frozen, hard as iron. Jace had been making trips to Voss's ranch every week now, sometimes staying 2 or 3 days at a time. Each time he came back, he looked more worn down, like the work was grinding him to dust. But he kept going. They needed the supplies, needed the information, needed any edge they could get. Lena had stopped asking him if it was worth it. She could see the answer in his eyes every time he rode back through the snow. She'd taken over most of the homestead work, what little there was to do when the land was still locked in winter's grip, hauling water, maintaining the cabin, keeping the horse fed on the meager hay they had left. She'd also started teaching herself to shoot with Jace's old rifle, practicing on tree stumps when the weather allowed. The first time she'd pulled the trigger, the recoil had knocked her flat on her back. The second time, she'd been ready for it. By the 20th time, she could hit what she was aiming at more often than not. It wasn't much, but it was something. One afternoon in early March, Jace came back earlier than expected. Lena was outside splitting wood, or trying to. The axe kept getting stuck in the frozen logs. When she heard the horse, she looked up and her stomach dropped. His face was dark with anger, and there was blood on his shirt. "What happened?" She dropped the axe and ran to him. "I'm fine." He dismounted stiffly, favoring his left side. "You're bleeding." "It's not mine." That was somehow worse. Lena helped him inside, made him sit by the fire. His knuckles were split and swelling. There was a bruise forming on his jaw. "Jace, what happened?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Too controlled. "One of Voss's men called you something." He flexed his damaged hand. "I hit him." "What did he call me?" "Doesn't matter." "It does if you got into a fight over it." Jace looked at her then, and she saw the raw anger still burning there. "He called you Voss's whore, said you were part of the payment on my debt, said Voss would come collect his share soon enough." Lena felt ice in her veins, not shock. She'd heard worse in her life. But the casual cruelty of it, the implication that she was property to be passed around, made her want to break something. "Did you kill him?" "No, but I wanted to." Jace's jaw clenched. "His friends pulled me off. Foreman told me not to come back." "So you lost the work?" "Yeah." They sat in silence. This was bad. The work had been their only source of supplies, their only window into Voss's operations. Without it, they were back to nothing. "How much food do we have left?" Jace asked. Lena had been keeping careful inventory. She didn't want to answer. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we stretch it. "And after that?" "After that we starve or we figure something else out." Jace stood up, started pacing. The cabin was too small for pacing, but he did it anyway. 3 steps one direction, 3 steps back. "I should have kept my mouth shut, should have just walked away." "He insulted me." "So what? Words don't matter when you're dead." "They matter to me." Lena stood too, blocking his path. "You stood up for me. No one's ever done that before." "Yeah, now we're going to starve because of my pride." "We were going to starve anyway. At least now we know what kind of man you are." He looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was. Out here, maybe being practical was the only way to survive, and she was being foolish, putting value on gestures and principles when they were running out of time. But she meant it. In that moment, knowing Jace had fought for her, actually fought, risked the only income they had, meant more than she could explain. "I need to check the traps," Jace said finally. "Been gone 3 days, maybe something's there." He left before she could respond. Lena watched him go, then turned her attention to the supplies. 2 weeks of food, the debt due in less than 4 weeks, and now no way to earn more time. She started making calculations in her head. Not the kind she wanted to make, but the kind she needed to. If they sold the horse, they might get $50. Maybe. It wouldn't be enough to satisfy Voss, but it could buy them time. Except without a horse, they couldn't leave, couldn't haul anything, couldn't work. The rifle might fetch $20. The few tools they had, another 10 or 15. Everything they owned might add up to $100 if they were lucky. $100 against a $3,000 debt. It was laughable, pathetic. Lena sat down at the rickety table and put her head in her hands. For the first time since arriving at this frozen hell, she let herself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that came from a place deeper than fear, from exhaustion, from the crushing weight of impossibility. When Jace came back an hour later, traps empty again, of course they were, he found her still sitting there. He didn't say anything, just pulled up the other chair and sat beside her. "I don't know what to do," Lena said. "Me neither. We can't pay. We can't run. We can't fight." "No." "So what's left?" Jace was quiet for a long time. Then, "We make him come to us." Lena looked up. "What?" "Voss wants this land, needs it, if that railroad rumor is true. But he needs us gone legally, clean transfer of property. If we refuse to leave, if we make him force us out, he'll just kill us and take it anyway." "Maybe. But he's a businessman first. He likes things legal, documented, makes it easier to sell later. If we dig in, make ourselves a problem, make him show his hand." Jace shook his head. "I don't know. I'm trying to find an angle and I can't see one." "What if we go public? Tell everyone what he's doing?" "Who's everyone?" "Nearest town is 40 miles. By the time we got there and back, he could have taken everything. And even if we made it, who'd believe us? Debt's legal. Contract's legal. We got no proof of anything except that I owe him money I can't pay." Lena stood up, started pacing now. "There has to be something, some leverage, some—" She stopped. "The documents." "What documents?" "You said he keeps records, legal papers, debt contracts. If he's doing this to other people, forcing them out with impossible terms, there'd be evidence, proof of a pattern." Jace was already shaking his head. "You want to break into Garrick Voss's house and steal his private records?" "Yes." "That's insane." "You have a better idea?" "Literally anything else. That's suicide." "So is sitting here waiting for April 1st? Lena leaned against the table. "Think about it. If we can prove he's systematically defrauding people, we take it to the territorial governor, the land office, someone who can actually do something. And if we get caught, we hang. That's what they do to thieves out here. If we do nothing, we lose everything anyway." Jay stood, started pulling on his coat. "I need to think." "Where are you going?" "Just outside. I think better when I'm cold." He left her alone again. Lena stood in the empty cabin, her mind racing. The plan was desperate, reckless, probably suicidal, but it was also the only plan that had any chance of actually changing things. Sitting here, rationing food, waiting for the inevitable, that wasn't fighting, that was just dying slowly. She'd spent her whole life being passive, accepting what happened to her, following other people's choices. And where had it gotten her? Sold to a stranger on a frozen frontier with death coming in 4 weeks. No more. If she was going to die, she'd die on her feet. When Jace came back in an hour later, face red from the cold, Lena was waiting. "I'm doing it," she said. "With you or without you?" He looked at her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely. You understand what you're suggesting? Breaking into the home of the most dangerous man in the territory. A man with private guards, locks, probably a safe. Even if we get in, even if we find something, we'd have to get out alive and then somehow get that information to someone who gives a damn before Voss's men hunt us down." "Yes, I understand all that. And you still want to do it." "I don't want to do it. I have to do it." Jace shook his head slowly, but she could see something changing in his eyes. Not hope, exactly, but maybe possibility. "If we do this, if we do it smart, we plan everything, we don't just run in blind." "Agreed. And we wait for the right moment, when he's distracted, when there's a reason for the house to be less guarded." "When would that be?" Jace thought for a moment. "There's a Stockmen's Association meeting in Coldwater on March 20th. Big gathering, all the ranchers. Voss always goes, takes most of his key men with him, likes to show off. Would leave the house with just a skeleton crew. That's in 12 days. Yeah. We'd have to move fast after. Get the evidence to the Capitol before he even knows it's gone. If there is any evidence, could be we risk everything and find nothing." Lena met his eyes. "Could be, but we're out of options and out of time. What else are we going to do?" Jace exhaled slowly. "All right, we do it, but we do it my way. Careful. Planned. Deal." They spent the next week preparing. Jace had been to Voss's ranch house a few times for pay, so he sketched out a rough layout from memory. The house was big, 2 stories, built from real lumber hauled in from somewhere that actually had trees. The office was on the first floor, west side. That's where Voss kept his papers, his ledgers. Probably a safe, though Jace had never seen it. "How many guards?" Lena asked, studying the sketch. "Usually 4 at night, 2 outside, 2 inside. Could be more, could be less." "And during the meeting?" "Hard to say. He'll take his foreman for sure, probably a couple others to make an impression. But he won't leave the place completely undefended. So we assume at least 2 guards, maybe 3. At least." Lena traced the outline of the house with one finger. "We need a distraction, something to pull them away from the office." "Fire? Too obvious, and too likely to destroy what we're looking for." They went back and forth, discarding ideas. Finally, Jay said, "The stables. They're about 50 yards from the main house. We spook the horses, make it look like a break-in or a predator. Guards will go check it out." "How do we spook them without getting kicked to death?" "Carefully." It wasn't much of a plan. There were 100 ways it could go wrong, but it was better than nothing. They also started preparing for the aftermath. If they found evidence, they'd need to move fast. Jace knew the route to the territorial capital, about 100 miles northeast. 3 days hard riding if the weather held. They'd need supplies, which they didn't have. They'd need the horse to be in good shape, which it wasn't. "We're putting everything on this one move," Lena said the night before the meeting. "Yeah. If it doesn't work, then we tried. That's more than most people do." She looked at him across the firelight. In the weeks since she'd arrived, Jace had changed, or maybe she was just seeing him differently. He wasn't just the broken man drowning in debt anymore. He was someone who'd gotten beaten down by life but kept getting back up. Someone who'd lost almost everything but still found reasons to fight. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. "Sure." "Do you regret it? Taking Voss's deal, getting stuck with me?" Jace was quiet for a long time. "I regretted it at first," he said finally. "Not you specifically, just the whole situation. Another chain around my neck, but now..." He met her eyes. "No, I don't regret it. You've kept me going when I would have given up. You've made me remember why any of this matters." Something warm bloomed in Lena's chest. "I don't regret it either. This place is hell, but at least I'm not alone in it." "Not alone," Jace agreed. They sat in comfortable silence until the fire burned low. The day of the stockmen's meeting, they watched from a distance as Voss's convoy left the ranch. 6 men on horseback, Voss himself in a small carriage. Jace had been right. The man liked to make an impression. "That leaves how many at the house?" Lena asked. They were hidden in a stand of pine trees about a quarter-mile from the ranch buildings. "Hard to tell, but less than usual." They waited until dark. The temperature dropped fast once the sun set, and Lena's hands were already numb inside her gloves. Jace had insisted they leave the horse tied up a mile back. Too risky to bring it closer. "Ready?" he asked. No, she wasn't ready. She was terrified, but she nodded anyway. They approached the ranch from the north, staying low, using every bit of cover. Jace moved like he'd done this before, which made Lena wonder about his past. She realized she still knew almost nothing about him before the debt, before his father died. The stables came first. They could hear the horses inside, restless sounds in the dark. 2 guards were visible near the main house, smoking and talking. No one watching the stables. "On 3, Jace whispered. "We go in. Make noise. Get out fast." Lena's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. Jace counted down silently with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. They slipped into the stables through a side door that wasn't locked. Inside, 8 horses in stalls, all of them bigger and healthier than their own starving animal. Jace moved to the far end, started banging on the stall doors, shouting. Lena did the same on her end. The horses panicked immediately, started kicking, whinnying, throwing themselves against the stall doors. One of them got loose, a big roan that thundered past Lena so close she felt the wind from it. "Go!" Jace hissed. They ran out the side door, circled wide around the stable. Behind them, they could hear shouting. The guards responding. Someone yelled about a wolf. Another voice said, "Coyotes." Jace and Lena made it to the main house while the guards were still dealing with the chaos. The front door was locked, but there was a window on the side, partially open for ventilation despite the cold. "Boost me up," Lena said. Jace made a step with his hands. She put her foot in it, he lifted, and she grabbed the window frame. It was a tight squeeze, but she was thin enough, too thin really, from weeks of rationing. She wriggled through, dropped onto the floor inside with a thud that sounded impossibly loud. She froze, listening. No response. No footsteps. She went to the door and opened it for Jace. They were in a hallway, dark but not completely. There was a lamp burning somewhere deeper in the house. Everything smelled of tobacco and leather and money. "Office is this way," Jace whispered. They moved fast. The door to the office was closed but not locked. Inside, it was exactly what Lena had expected. Heavy desk, leather chairs, shelves of books and ledgers. And yes, a safe in the corner. "Can you open it?" Lena asked. "Not a chance. So we take what's not locked up." They started going through the desk drawers, the shelves. There were ledgers everywhere, accounts, transactions, inventory lists. Lena grabbed anything that looked like it might contain debt contracts or property records. Jace found a ledger labeled Land Acquisitions and shoved it in his coat. "This is taking too long," Jace said. Someone's going to—" Footsteps in the hall. They both froze. The footsteps got closer. A man's voice calling out, "Everything's secure down here?" Another voice, farther away, "Yeah, just the horse is acting up." The footsteps paused right outside the office door. Lena's hand found Jace's in the dark. They stood there, not breathing, as the door handle started to turn. Then another shout from outside. "They're getting out! We need help!" The footsteps moved away fast. The front door opened and slammed shut. "Now," Jace said. "We go now." They grabbed what they could carry and ran. Back down the hall, out through the window Lena had come in. They heard voices behind them but didn't look back, just ran into the darkness with their arms full of stolen paper. They made it to the trees, kept running. Lena's lungs burned and her arms ached from carrying the ledgers, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Behind them someone was shouting, but the voices got fainter. They reached the horse, still there, thank everything, and kept moving. Didn't stop until they were 2 miles away and the ranch was completely out of sight. Only then did they stop to catch their breath. "Did we just do that?" Lena gasped. "Yeah." Jace was breathing just as hard. "Yeah, we did." They looked at each other in the moonlight. And then, despite everything, despite the danger they were still in, despite not knowing if they'd found anything useful, they started laughing. Not happy laughter. Hysterical, exhausted, we might die tomorrow laughter. "We're insane," Lena said. "Completely." They made it back to the cabin just before dawn, spread the stolen documents across the table, and started reading by lamplight. At first it looked like routine business records. Then Lena found something. "Jace, look at this." It was a ledger of debt contracts, page after page of them. And the terms were all similar. Impossible interest rates, balloon payments, clauses that triggered massive penalties for tiny infractions. And in the margins, notes in handwriting that wasn't official, things like foreclosed by spring and railroad route confirmed. "He's been doing this for years," Jace said, scanning another ledger. "Dozens of people, all driven off their land the same way. And look," Lena pointed to a map they'd found, folded in with the contracts. It showed the territory with a line drawn through it, the proposed railroad route. Every single property Voss had acquired, including theirs, sat right on that line. "This is it," Jace said quietly. "This is proof." They spent the next 2 hours organizing everything, making notes, trying to build a clear case. By the time they finished, the sun was fully up and they were both dead on their feet. "We need to leave today," Jace said. "Soon as Voss discovers the break-in, he'll know it was us. He'll come after us." "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." They packed fast. Food, water, blankets, the documents. Everything they absolutely needed and nothing else. The cabin that had been their prison for 3 months would have to stand or fall without them now. "Ready?" Jace asked, one hand on the door. Lena looked around the small space one last time. She'd arrived here as property, as a transaction. She was leaving as something else, someone who'd made choices, someone who'd fought back. "Ready," she said. They rode northeast toward the capital, pushing the horse as hard as they dared. The weather held. No storms, just cold and clear. They made good time the first day, covering almost 40 miles before they had to stop and rest. That night, huddled around a small fire in a cave they'd found, Jace said, "What happens if this doesn't work? It has to work." "But if it doesn't," Lena stared into the flames. "Then we tried, and at least we go down fighting instead of waiting." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. "Whatever happens, I'm glad you were here. Glad I didn't have to do this alone." "Me too." She leaned against him, exhausted beyond measure. His arm came around her shoulders. Neither of them said anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. The second day was harder. The horse was flagging, and Lena could feel her own strength giving out. They'd been running on adrenaline and fear, but that was wearing thin. When they stopped to rest at midday, Jace checked their back trail. "We're being followed," he said. Lena's blood went cold. "How many?" 3 riders, maybe 4. Hard to tell from this distance." "Voss's men." "Probably." "How far back?" 5 miles, maybe 6. They're pushing hard." Lena looked at their exhausted horse, then at the trail ahead. They were still 30 miles from the capital, with riders behind them who had fresher mounts, who knew this territory, who wouldn't stop until they caught up. "We're not going to make it," she said. "Not if we keep running straight." Jace was thinking, calculating. "But if we split up, if I lead them away while you take the documents—" "No." "Lena, no. We stay together or we don't do this at all. Be practical. If they catch both of us, it's all over. This way, at least the evidence gets through." "And you die leading them away." "I'm not doing that." "It's not your choice." She grabbed his arm. "Like hell it's not. We're partners. We do this together." They stared at each other. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, men were coming, men with guns and orders and no mercy. Jace's expression softened. "All right, together. But we need a new plan, because straight riding isn't going to cut it." They studied the terrain. The trail ahead wound through increasingly rough country, hills, ravines, patches of forest. Good for ambushes, if they had the energy for it. Good for hiding, if they had time. "There," Jace pointed to a narrow canyon about a mile ahead. "We go through there, we might be able to lose them. It branches 3 different ways at the end. Or they could trap us. Everything's a risk at this point." They pushed on. Reached the canyon entrance just as the riders behind them came into view. Lena saw them clearly now, 4 men, riding hard, definitely Voss's men. The canyon walls rose up on either side, blocking out the sky. The trail was narrow, barely wide enough for a single horse. Their animal picked its way carefully over loose rocks and ice. "If they start shooting in here, we're dead," Lena said. "They won't shoot. Voss wants us alive. Wants to know what we took." "That's not comforting." Wasn't meant to be. They reached the split in the canyon. 3 paths, like Jace had said. They took the middle one on instinct more than strategy. Kept moving, kept pushing. Behind them, the sound of pursuit echoed off the canyon walls. And somewhere ahead, in a capital city they'd never seen, was their only hope of turning any of this around. Together, they rode toward it. The middle canyon path narrowed even further, forcing them to dismount and lead the horse by hand. Rocks jutted from the walls at odd angles, and ice made every step treacherous. Lena's boots kept slipping, and twice she had to grab the canyon wall to keep from falling. Behind them, the echoes of pursuit had gone quiet, which was somehow worse than hearing them. "They stopped," Lena whispered, "or they're being smart, waiting to see which path we took." Jace kept moving, one hand on the horse's bridle, the other touching the canyon wall for balance. "Keep going. Don't stop." The path twisted and climbed. Lena's lungs burned from the thin air and the exertion. The documents in her coat felt like they weighed 100 pounds. Her hands were so cold, she could barely feel her fingers anymore. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the canyon path opened onto a ridge overlooking a valley. Below them, scattered lights marked what might be a settlement. Not the capital, they weren't that lucky, but something. "Bridger's Creek," Jay said, squinting at the distant lights. "Trading post, maybe 20 families. It's something." "Do we stop?" "We have to. Horse can't go much further without rest, and neither can we." They picked their way down the far side of the ridge as darkness fell completely. By the time they reached the settlement, Lena was stumbling with exhaustion. The trading post was a squat building with smoke coming from the chimney and lamplight in the windows. A few other structures clustered around it: houses, a stable, what might have been a church or meeting hall. Jace tied up the horse and they went inside. The warmth hit Lena like a physical force, and she realized just how cold she'd gotten. Her whole body started shaking. The man behind the counter looked up from a ledger. He was old, weathered, with sharp eyes that took in everything about them in one glance. "Help you?" "Need supplies," Jace said. "Food, grain for the horse, whatever you can spare." "Got money?" Jace pulled out what little they had left, maybe $5 in coins. The man looked at it, then at them again. Lena knew what he was seeing: two half-frozen people, exhausted, running from something. "That'll get you some hardtack and a bit of oats," the man said. "Not much else." "We'll take it." While the man gathered their purchases, Lena moved closer to the stove in the corner, trying to thaw out. Another customer was there, an older woman in a thick wool coat. She gave Lena a long look. "You two running from something?" Lena's first instinct was to lie. But something in the woman's face, concern maybe, or just curiosity, made her reconsider. "Yes." "Boss?" The name hung in the air between them. Lena nodded slowly. The woman's expression hardened. "Figured. He's been pushing people out for 2 years now. My brother lost his place last fall. Couldn't pay the debt. Voss took everything." "Where's your brother now?" "Dead. Put a gun in his mouth 3 weeks after losing the land." The woman said it matter-of-factly, but there was an ocean of pain beneath the words. "You fighting back?" "Trying to." "Good." The woman reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. She pressed it into Lena's hand. "Not much, maybe $20, but it's yours if it helps." "I can't." "Yes, you can. Someone needs to stand up to that bastard. Might as well be you." The woman turned to leave, then stopped. "There's 4 men came through about an hour ago, asking about a couple on horseback. I told them I hadn't seen anyone. Others in town might not be so helpful." Lena's stomach dropped. "They're already here?" "Spread out searching. You should move on soon as you can." The woman left. Lena stood there with the pouch in her hand, feeling the weight of a stranger's hope and grief. Jace came over with their supplies. "We need to go." "I know. Voss's men are already in town. Damn it." He looked around his trading post like he was calculating distances, exits, options. "We'll cut through behind the buildings, head northeast. Stay off the main trail." They left through the back door. The cold hit them again, vicious after the warmth inside. They moved quickly through the shadows between buildings, leading the horse as quietly as they could. They almost made it. A voice called out from behind them. "Hold up there." Lena turned. 2 men, both armed, both with the hard look of Voss's hired muscle. One was tall and thin, the other shorter but built like a bull. They were blocking the path back toward the trading post. "Mr. Voss wants a word with you," the tall one said. "Both of you." Jace's hand moved toward his coat, where Lena knew he kept an old revolver. "We're not interested in talking." Wasn't really a request. The shorter man moved forward. Jace pulled the revolver, but he was too slow. The man grabbed his wrist, twisted hard. The gun fell into the snow. Jace threw a punch with his other hand, connected with the man's jaw. The man barely flinched, just drove his fist into Jace's stomach. Jace went down hard. Lena ran at the shorter man without thinking, just pure instinct. She hit him from the side, all her weight behind it. He staggered, but didn't fall. Grabbed her by the coat and threw her into the wall of the nearest building. Her head cracked against the wood and stars exploded in her vision. "Easy now," the tall man said, picking up Jace's revolver. "No need for anyone to get hurt worse than they already are." Lena tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She could see Jace on the ground, clutching his stomach, trying to breathe. The documents were still in her coat. If these men searched them, check them, the tall man said. The shorter one moved toward Jace first, started going through his pockets. Lena's hand found a rock half buried in the snow beside her. Not big, but solid, heavy enough. When the shorter man turned toward her, she swung. The rock caught him on the temple. Not hard enough to knock him out, but hard enough to stagger him. He cursed, hand going to his head. Lena scrambled up and ran. Not away from town. Toward it. Toward lights and people and witnesses. "Stop her," the tall man shouted. Footsteps behind her. Lena's lungs were screaming, but she kept running, burst into the main street where a few people were still outside despite the cold. She ran straight for the trading post, threw open the door. The old man looked up, startled. "What? They're trying to kill us," Lena shouted. "Voss's men!" The tall man appeared in the doorway behind her, breathing hard. "Sorry for the disturbance, just retrieving some property that belongs to Mr. Voss." "Property?" The old man's eyes narrowed. "She looks like a person to me." "It's a legal matter. Debt collection." "None of your concern." But other people were coming now. The woman who'd given Lena money, a few men from the nearby houses, all of them looking at the scene with various degrees of interest and suspicion. "This is a private matter," the tall man said, tension creeping into his voice. "Doesn't look private," someone said from the back. The tall man's hand moved toward his gun. Everyone saw it. The mood in the room shifted instantly, curious to dangerous in a heartbeat. "I wouldn't," the old man said quietly. "Not unless you want to explain to the territorial marshal why you shot someone in front of a dozen witnesses." Outside there was a scuffle. Lena looked through the window and saw Jace fighting with the shorter man. They were both on the ground, rolling in the snow, throwing wild punches. "Enough!" A new voice, loud and commanding. A man stepped into the street, middle-aged, wearing a badge pinned to his coat. "What's going on here?" The deputy. Lena felt a surge of hope. The tall man immediately changed his demeanor, all friendly cooperation. "Just a misunderstanding, Deputy Carson. These two stole from Mr. Voss. We're bringing them back to answer for it." "That true?" The deputy looked at Lena. "We didn't steal anything," Lena said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "We took evidence. Proof that Voss has been defrauding people for years, forcing them off their land with illegal debt contracts. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. We have documents, ledgers, all of it." The deputy looked between Lena and the tall man. "You have these documents with you?" Lena pulled the papers from inside her coat, held them up for everyone to see. "Those are stolen property," the tall man said quickly, "taken during a break-in at Mr. Voss's home." "Maybe," the deputy said, "but I think I'd like to take a look at them myself before anyone goes anywhere." The tall man's jaw clenched. "Mr. Voss won't be happy about this." "Mr. Voss can come talk to me himself if he's got concerns. Right now I'm more interested in what these papers say." The deputy gestured to Lena. "Come with me." "You too," he said to Jace, who was still in the street, bloodied but standing. They followed the deputy to a small office attached to the meeting hall. The tall man and his partner stayed outside, watching with cold eyes. Inside, the deputy lit a lamp and spread the documents across a desk. He read in silence for several minutes while Lena and Jace stood there, dripping melting snow onto the floor. "Where'd you get these?" the deputy asked finally. "Voss's house," Jace admitted, 2 nights ago. "So you did break in?" "Yes, because it was the only way to prove what he's doing." The deputy kept reading. His expression got darker with each page. If this is real, this is fraud on a massive scale." "It's real," Lena said, "every page." "You understand what you're asking me to do here? You're asking me to go against one of the most powerful men in the territory based on documents you obtained illegally. We're asking you to look at the evidence and decide if it matters how we got it." The deputy leaned back in his chair. Outside, they could hear the murmur of voices. The crowd hadn't dispersed. "I'm just a deputy in a small settlement. This is way beyond my authority." "Well, then help us get it to someone who has authority," Jace said. "The territorial governor, the land office, anyone." "Voss will fight this. He'll bring lawyers, call in favors. Even if this evidence is solid, you two broke the law getting it. They could charge you, put you in prison." "Better than being dead," Lena said. The deputy rubbed his face. "I could hold you here. Send for the marshal. Let him sort this out." "How long would that take?" "Week, maybe 2. "We don't have 2 weeks. Voss will have us killed long before any marshal shows up." "I can protect you. You're one man in a town of 20 families. Voss has an army." Jace leaned forward. "Look, we know we're asking a lot. We know this puts you in a bad spot. But people are losing everything because of what Voss is doing. My father died under the weight of one of these contracts. That woman's brother killed himself. How many more before someone does something? The deputy was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up. I can't officially help you, but I can unofficially tell you that there's a telegraph office in Millbrook, about 15 miles northeast of here. You could wire the territorial governor's office directly. Get this information to them without having to make the full trip to the capital. That would work, Lena said, hope sparking. I can also tell you that I need to hold these men outside for questioning. Might take me a few hours to get their statements. By then, you could be long gone. The deputy looked at them both seriously. But I never had this conversation with you, and if anyone asks, you overpowered me and escaped. Understood? Jace nodded. Understood. There's a back way out of here, through the meeting hall and out the rear door. Your horse is in the stable, third stall. Take the north trail. It's longer but less traveled. Keep those documents safe. Thank you, Lena said. Don't thank me. Just make sure this means something. Make sure people know what Voss did. They left through the back way, moving fast. Got the horse from the stable and were riding out of Bridger's Creek within 10 minutes. Behind them, they could hear the deputy loudly declaring that prisoners had escaped, that everyone should help search. But no one came after them. They rode through the night, following the north trail. It was rougher than the deputy had suggested, barely a trail at all in some places, just a direction through scrub and snow. But it was away from Voss's men, and that was all that mattered. Dawn found them exhausted but still moving. The horse was on its last legs, stumbling every few steps. Lena wasn't much better. She'd been running on adrenaline for so long that now, with a few hours of relative safety, her body was trying to shut down. There, Jace said, pointing ahead. Millbrook was bigger than Bridger's Creek, maybe 50 buildings, actual streets, the look of a real town. And yes, she could see the telegraph wires running along the main street. They rode in slowly. A few people stared at them, 2 ragged, frozen people on a dying horse, but no one stopped them. Jace found the telegraph office, and they practically fell off the horse. Inside, a young man looked up from his desk. His eyes widened at their appearance. Can I help you? Need to send a telegram, Jace said. To the territorial governor's office. It's urgent. All right. What's the message? Jace looked at Lena. She pulled out the documents again, picked out the most damning pages. Say this. Evidence of systematic fraud by Garrick Voss. Multiple illegal debt contracts, forced land seizures, conspiracy to control railroad route. Documents available for inspection. Request immediate investigation. Send Marshall to Millbrook. The young man wrote it down, reading it back to make sure he had it right. That's going to be expensive. $3, maybe more depending on length. Lena pulled out the pouch the woman had given her, counted out the money. Send it, and we need to send copies to the land office too, and the territorial marshal's office. That's going to be, I know, just do it. It took most of the money they had, but within an hour, the messages were sent. Copies to 3 different offices. Proof that couldn't be suppressed or hidden. They waited in a small boarding house, paying for a room with the last few dollars. Lena collapsed on the bed, too tired to even take off her boots. Jace sat by the window watching the street. How long until they respond? Lena asked. Could be days, could be hours. Depends who's in the office, how seriously they take it. What if they don't take it seriously? Then we're back where we started. Except now Voss knows exactly what we did and where we are. Comforting. Jace almost smiled. We did it, though. Whatever happens now, we got the information out. That's more than most people manage. Lena closed her eyes. Her body ached everywhere. Her head throbbed where she'd hit the wall. But underneath it all was something else. Not pride exactly, just the knowledge that they'd fought back, that they hadn't gone quietly. She must have fallen asleep because the next thing she knew, Jace was shaking her shoulder. Someone's coming. Lena jerked awake. Through the window she could see riders entering town, 5 of them. And in the lead, on a black horse that probably cost more than most people made in a year, was Garrick Voss himself. He looked exactly like Lena had imagined. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of face that was handsome in a cold way. Like a snake would be handsome if snakes wore expensive coats and carried themselves like they owned the world. He came himself, Lena said. We really pissed him off. They watched as Voss and his men stopped in front of the telegraph office. Voss dismounted, went inside, came out a few minutes later looking darker than before. He knows we sent the telegrams, Jace said. Do we run? Where? We're out of money, out of supplies, and the horse can barely walk. We run now. We die in the wilderness. So we stay and face him. Looks like. Lena's hand found Jace's. He squeezed her fingers. They watched as Voss conferred with his men, pointing at different buildings, organizing a search. A knock at the door made them both jump. Open up, a voice called. Mr. Voss wants to talk. Jace and Lena looked at each other. They could refuse, could barricade the door, try to hold out. But for how long and to what end? We talk in public, Jace called back. Main Street, where everyone can see. A pause, then 5 minutes. They went downstairs together. The boarding house owner, a stout woman with suspicious eyes, watched them pass. You two in trouble? Probably, Lena said. Voss? Yeah. The woman nodded slowly. My husband lost our ranch to him 3 years ago. Debt we couldn't pay. Left us with nothing. She reached under the counter and pulled out an old shotgun. He tries anything in my establishment. He'll regret it. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive. They walked out into the street. A crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in small towns. Everyone knew something was happening. Everyone wanted to see. Voss was waiting in the middle of the street, his men flanking him. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that assessed and dismissed in the same glance. Mr. Calder, Voss said. His voice was smooth, educated. And Mrs. Calder, you've caused quite a bit of trouble. We exposed your fraud, Jace said. That's not trouble, that's justice. Fraud is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as aggressive business practices. You destroyed people's lives. I gave people opportunities. Loans when no one else would lend to them. It's not my fault if they couldn't manage their finances. You designed the contracts so they couldn't pay, Lena said. Impossible interest rates, penalty clauses. You were never trying to help anyone. You were just stealing land. Voss's expression didn't change. You broke into my home, stole my private property. That's a crime, Mrs. Calder, a serious one. So is fraud on this scale. Where's your proof? Some papers you claim came from my office? Papers that could have been forged, altered, fabricated? Voss smiled, and it was the coldest thing Lena had ever seen. You have nothing that will stand up in any court. The territorial governor will investigate, Jace said. The marshal's coming. Let them come. They'll find a respected businessman with excellent lawyers and connections all the way to Washington. And they'll find 2 criminals who admitted to breaking and entering. Voss took a step forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return my property, the documents you stole. You're going to sign a confession admitting to the break-in, and then you're going to leave this territory and never come back. And our debt? Forgiven, clean slate. All you have to do is walk away. Lena felt Jace tense beside her. It was tempting. She could see it in his eyes. The chance to just end this. To be free. But they'd come too far. No, Lena said. Voss turned his cold eyes on her. Excuse me? We're not walking away. We're not signing anything. And we're not giving back the evidence. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Voss's expression finally changed. Just a flicker of anger breaking through the smooth facade. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's our mistake to make. For a long moment, no one moved. The crowd watched. Voss's men waited for orders. Lena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, then the sound of horses. Coming fast. Everyone turned. 6 riders coming from the east, and in the lead, wearing a badge that caught the morning sun, was a man who looked like he'd ridden hard and fast. Territorial Marshal, someone in the crowd murmured. The marshal dismounted, looked at the assembled crowd, at Voss, at Jace, and Lena. Someone want to tell me what's going on here? A private business matter, Voss said smoothly. Nothing that requires territorial involvement. That's not what the telegram said. Telegram said fraud, land seizures, corruption. The marshal's eyes were sharp. That sounds like exactly the kind of thing that requires territorial involvement. Those telegrams were sent by criminals, thieves who broke into my home. Maybe, but I'll be the judge of that. The marshal looked at Lena. You have the documents you mentioned? Lena pulled them from inside her coat, handed them over. The marshal glanced through them, his expression getting harder with each page. Mr. Voss, I'm going to need you to come with me, answer some questions. This is outrageous. I'm a respected... I don't care if you're the president himself. There's enough here to warrant an investigation, and you're going to cooperate or I'll arrest you for obstruction. Voss's jaw clenched. My lawyers will hear about this. I'm sure they will, but right now you're coming with me. The marshal gestured to his men. Two of them moved to flank Voss. Voss looked at Lena and Jace one last time. This isn't over. Yeah, Jace said quietly. It is. They watched as the marshal and his men escorted Voss away. The crowd started talking all at once, excited voices filling the street. Lena felt her knees go weak. Jace caught her before she fell. We did it, she said. Not yet. Investigation could take months. He could still get out of this. But we gave them evidence. We made them look. That's more than anyone else did. Jace pulled her close. Yeah, it is. They stood there in the middle of the street, holding each other up, while the town buzzed with the news around them. The sun was fully up now, warming the frozen ground, melting the ice that had covered everything. Spring was coming, and for the first time in months, Lena let herself believe they might actually live to see it. The marshal kept them in Millbrook for 3 days while he started his preliminary investigation. They stayed in the boarding house, the owner refusing payment after she learned what they'd done. Other people in town brought them food, clothes, supplies. Word had spread fast about Voss's arrest, and it turned out a lot of folks had stories about people they'd known who'd been destroyed by his contracts. My cousin, one man said, bringing them a basket of bread and dried meat, lost everything 2 winters back, found him frozen in a ditch a month later. My sister's husband, a woman told them. Voss took their farm. They had 3 kids, had to split the family up, send them to relatives who could feed them. Story after story, each one a small tragedy that Voss had engineered for profit. On the 3rd day, the marshal called them to the telegraph office. Governor's office is sending an investigator. Should be here in a week. They want you to testify, give a full statement about everything you know. We'll do it, Jace said. There's something else. The marshal's expression was cautious. You both admitted to breaking into Voss's property. Technically, that's still a crime. The prosecutor could charge you. Lena felt her stomach drop. After everything, I'm not saying they will, just saying they could. Voss's lawyers are already making noise about it, calling you thieves, saying the evidence is tainted because of how it was obtained. So we might still go to prison. Maybe. Or maybe the prosecutor decides it's not worth it given the circumstances. Hard to say. The marshal leaned back in his chair. What I can tell you is this. Voss is going to fight this with everything he has. Money, lawyers, political connections. Even with the evidence you brought, this isn't going to be quick or easy. How long? Jace asked. Months. Maybe a year before it goes to trial. And our debt? Our land? That's complicated. Technically, the debt still exists until a court rules the contract was fraudulent, which means Voss could still try to collect. Lena and Jace looked at each other. They'd risked everything, exposed Voss, brought in the marshal, and they were still trapped. There might be one option, the marshal said slowly. The Territorial Land Office has a provision for disputed properties. If you file a claim saying the debt was obtained through fraud, they can put a hold on any collection attempts until the case is resolved. Wouldn't erase the debt, but it would keep Voss from taking the land while the investigation is ongoing. How do we file that claim? I can help you with the paperwork, but you'd need to go back to your homestead. Prove you're still actively working the land. Courts don't look kindly on people who abandon their property. Go back. To the cabin that was barely standing, on land that had nearly killed them, with winter only just starting to break. When would we need to leave? Lena asked. Soon as possible. Every day you're away is another day Voss's lawyers can argue you abandoned the claim. They left Millbrook the next morning with supplies donated by townspeople who saw them as heroes. It felt strange to Lena. They'd just been trying to survive, to fight back against something unjust. But people kept thanking them, shaking their hands, telling them they were brave. Brave. She didn't feel brave. She felt exhausted and scared and unsure if any of this would actually work. The ride back took 4 days. They had to go slow because the horse was still recovering and they were both running on fumes. At night, they camped in whatever shelter they could find. Caves, abandoned line shacks, once under an overhang that barely kept the rain off. "You ever think about just leaving?" Lena asked one night. They were huddled around a small fire, sharing the last of some jerky someone had given them. "Just saying to hell with all of it and starting over somewhere else?" "Every day," Jace admitted. "But where would we go? We've got no money, no prospects, and if we run now, Voss wins. Everything we did, everyone who helped us, it all means nothing. Maybe nothing is better than this." "You don't believe that." She didn't. That was the frustrating part. Despite everything, despite the cold and the hunger and the uncertainty, some stubborn part of her refused to give up. "I hate that you're right," she said. Jace smiled, just a little. "You'll get used to it. Don't count on it." They reached the homestead on the 5th day. The cabin looked worse than Lena remembered. The roof patch had blown off again, there was snow piled inside, and something had tried to break into the food stores they'd left behind. "Home sweet home," Jace said dryly. They spent the rest of that day and all of the next just making the place livable again. Patching the roof, cleaning out the snow, checking what supplies were salvageable. It was depressing work. They'd left with hope and come back to the same desperate situation, just with different stakes. But as they worked, something shifted. Maybe it was knowing they'd actually fought back. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time they weren't completely alone in this. Whatever it was, the work felt different, less like futility and more like building something. "We need to plant," Lena said on the 3rd day back. The snow was melting fast now, revealing the muddy ground beneath. "If we're going to prove we're working this land, we need to actually work it. It's early. Frost could still kill anything we put in the ground. So we start small. Hardy crops, things that can take a late freeze." Jace looked at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "With what seeds? What tools? We've got nothing. Then we get something." "How?" Lena thought about it. They had no money, no credit, nothing to trade, but they had a story now. And stories, she was learning, had value. "The people in Millbrook helped us. Maybe people closer to home will too." The nearest neighbors were the Hendersons, about 8 miles east. Lena and Jace had never met them. They'd been too busy surviving to socialize. But Jace knew of them, knew they'd been farming this territory for a decade or more. They rode over on a gray morning when the mud was so thick the horse kept getting stuck. The Henderson place was bigger than theirs. A real house with glass windows and a barn that wasn't falling down. Smoke came from the chimney and chickens pecked around the yard. A woman answered their knock. She was maybe 40, with capable hands and eyes that took in their ragged appearance without judgment. "Help you?" "I'm Jace Calder. This is my wife, Lena. We own the property, about 8 miles west." "The old Calder place. Heard it was occupied again." The woman's expression shifted slightly. "Also heard some other things. About Voss and some trouble in Millbrook." "It's true," Lena said. "All of it." The woman studied them for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. "Come in. I'll put coffee on." Her name was Margaret Henderson. Her husband, Tom, came in from the barn while they were talking. He was a big man with a weathered face and hands scarred from years of hard work. Lena and Jace told them everything. The debt, the break-in, the evidence, the marshal. Margaret and Tom listened without interrupting. When they finished, Tom leaned back in his chair. "Voss tried something similar with us about 5 years back. Offered us a loan to expand. Terms looked good on paper. My wife here..." He nodded at Margaret. "She read the whole contract, found the clauses that would have destroyed us. We turned it down." "We weren't so lucky," Jay said. "No, but you're still here, still fighting. That's worth something." Tom stood up. "What do you need?" "Seeds," Lena said. "Tools, if you can spare them. We need to prove we're working the land." "And you will be working it? This isn't just for show?" "We're going to try." Margaret exchanged a look with her husband. Some silent conversation happened between them. Then she nodded. "We've got seed potatoes," Tom said. "Some wheat seed, though it's getting late for wheat. Tools you can borrow, a plow, some hand tools. You'll need to return them once you get on your feet, but until then, they're yours. Lena felt her throat tighten. We can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. What you did in Millbrook, taking on Voss, that helps all of us. Man like that, he doesn't stop with one property. He keeps going until someone stops him. Maybe you two will be the ones who do it. They left the Henderson place with a wagon full of supplies and something that felt dangerously like hope. Over the next week, they prepared the ground. The work was brutal. The earth was still half frozen, and every foot of turned soil felt like it took a year off their lives. But they kept at it. Lena had never farmed before. She'd never put seeds in the ground and hoped they'd grow. But there was something almost meditative about it. The repetition. The faith that what you put in would come back as something more. You think it'll work? She asked Jace one evening. They were both covered in mud, sitting on the cabin steps, too tired to move. The crops? All of it. The investigation, the trial. This. She gestured at the turned earth, the half-planted rows. I don't know, Jace said honestly. But I know we're trying. That's more than I was doing before you got here. Before I got sold to you, you mean? Yeah. That. He looked at her. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. I know that's a terrible thing to say given how you ended up here, but it's true. Lena bumped her shoulder against his. I'm glad too. In a weird, messed up way. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. In the distance, they could see the first green shoots of their potato plants breaking through the soil. It wasn't much, but it was something. The investigator from the governor's office arrived in late April. His name was Samuel Pritchard, and he looked like a man who'd seen every kind of corruption the territory had to offer and been disappointed by all of it. He rode out to the homestead with 2 assistants and spent 3 hours going over everything with Lena and Jace. This is good, he said finally, looking at the documents they'd stolen. Very good. Clear pattern of fraud, predatory lending practices, evidence of conspiracy. It's enough to bring charges. Will it be enough to convict? Jace asked. That depends on the jury. Depends on the judge. Depends on how good Voss's lawyers are. Pritchard closed the ledger he'd been reading. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be a fight. Voss has money and influence. He'll drag this out as long as he can, try to discredit you both, make you look like criminals. We did break into his house, Lena said. Yes, and that's a problem. His lawyers are already pushing the prosecutor to charge you both. The only reason they haven't yet is because the prosecutor knows how bad it would look, going after the people who exposed massive fraud while the actual fraudster walks free. So we might still go to prison. Unlikely, but possible. More likely, they'll try to use the threat of charges to pressure you into a deal. Drop the testimony, drop the case, and they'll let the break-in slide. We're not doing that, Lena said immediately. I didn't think you would, but I wanted you to know what you're facing. Pritchard stood up. The trial is scheduled for August, 3 months from now. I'll need you both to come to the Capitol to testify. Can you do that? Yes, Jace said. Good. In the meantime, keep working this land. Keep records of everything you do. The more you can show you're legitimate homesteaders trying to make an honest living, the better you'll look to a jury. Pritchard left with his assistants and the documents. Lena and Jace stood in the yard, watching them ride away. 3 months, Lena said. 3 months. We can do that. Yeah, we can. They threw themselves into the work. The crops needed constant attention, weeding, watering, protecting from animals and weather. They also started repairing the cabin properly. Not just patching holes, but actually fixing things, making it a real home instead of just a shelter. The Hendersons came by once a week, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just checking in. Other neighbors started showing up too. People Lena and Jace didn't even know, who'd heard their story and wanted to help. A family brought them 3 chickens. An old man taught them how to build proper fences. A young couple gave them seeds for a vegetable garden. It was strange, being part of a community after so long feeling isolated and alone. But it was good strange. In early June, a lawyer showed up. He was young, maybe 30, with earnest eyes and a worn briefcase. My name is David Brennan, he said. The territorial governor's office asked me to represent you in the case against Voss. We can't afford a lawyer, Jace said immediately. You're not paying. The territory is. This case is bigger than just your debt now. We're going after Voss for systematic fraud, conspiracy, corruption. You two are the key witnesses, but there are others coming forward. People who lost their land. People who were too scared to speak up before. Lena felt something loosen in her chest. They weren't alone in this. Brennan spent the afternoon going over their testimony, preparing them for what the trial would be like. Voss's lawyers will try to destroy your credibility, he warned. They'll bring up the break-in, question your motives, paint you as opportunists trying to avoid your legitimate debts. How do we fight that? Lena asked. By telling the truth, by being honest about what happened and why you did what you did. Juries can spot a liar. If you're straight with them, they'll listen. Over the next weeks, Brennan visited several more times. Each visit, he seemed more confident. We've got 19 other families willing to testify about Voss's practices. 11 of them have contracts with the same predatory clauses as yours. The evidence is overwhelming. But? Lena could hear the unspoken word. But Voss has hired the best legal team money can buy. They're already filing motions to suppress evidence, to exclude testimony, to delay the trial. They're trying to make this so complicated and drawn out that people give up. We're not giving up. I know, but I needed you to understand what you're in for. The crops grew. The wheat came up golden in the July sun. The potatoes flourished. The vegetable garden produced more than they could eat. For the first time since arriving at the homestead, they had enough food. Not just surviving, actually living. One evening in late July, Jace and Lena sat on the newly repaired porch watching the sunset over their land. The cabin had a solid roof now. The barn was standing straight. There were chickens in the yard and food in the stores and crops in the field. Look at this, Jace said quietly. Look at what we built. Lena looked, and for a moment she could see it. Not what it was, but what it could be. A real home, a real life, something they'd created with their own hands. Think we'll get to keep it? She asked. I don't know, but even if we don't, we proved we could do this. That means something. She took his hand. Over the months, their relationship had shifted. They'd started as strangers forced together, become partners through necessity. And somewhere along the way, it had turned into something more, something neither of them had quite named yet, but both of them felt. I love you, Lena said. She hadn't planned to say it. The words just came out. Jace looked at her, surprise clear on his face. Then he smiled. A real smile, the kind she'd only seen a few times. I love you too. They kissed as the sun set over their land. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about their life was perfect, but it was theirs. They'd fought for it, bled for it, nearly died for it, and now they'd find out if they got to keep it. The trial started on August 15th. Lena and Jace rode to the Capitol the week before, Brennan having arranged lodging for them in a boarding house near the courthouse. The Capitol was bigger than any place Lena had ever been. Actual streets, gas lamps, buildings 3 and 4 stories tall. The courthouse was an imposing stone structure that made Lena feel small. Inside, it was all dark wood and serious faces. The jury selection took 2 days. Brennan carefully questioned each potential juror, looking for people who might be sympathetic to homesteaders, people who'd been taken advantage of by powerful men. Voss's lawyers did the opposite, looking for businessmen, property owners, people who'd side with the status quo. The trial itself started on a Wednesday. The courtroom was packed, standing room only. Apparently their case had attracted attention. The newspapers had been covering it for weeks, painting it as a battle between hardworking settlers and corrupt land barons. Voss sat at the defense table looking calm and confident. His lawyers were 3 men in expensive suits who exuded competence. Brennan looked young and slightly overwhelmed by comparison. But when he stood to give his opening statement, something changed. His voice was clear and strong, and he laid out the case methodically. This is a story about greed, about a man who saw opportunity in other people's desperation, who designed contracts specifically to fail, who built an empire on the broken backs of families just trying to survive. Voss's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Harrison, gave his own opening. This is a story about theft, about 2 criminals who broke into a private residence and stole documents to avoid their legitimate debts, about people trying to use the legal system to escape their own poor decisions. The first witnesses were other families Voss had targeted, One by one, they told their stories. Lost farms, broken families, debts that spiraled out of control no matter what they did. Brennan walked each one through their contract, showing the jury the impossible terms. Voss's lawyers cross-examined hard, trying to poke holes in the testimony. But you did sign the contract, didn't you? No one forced you. You did miss payments? You did fail to meet the terms you agreed to? Some witnesses held up well, others crumbled. It was painful to watch. On the fourth day, Lena was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. Brennan smiled at her encouragingly. Mrs. Calder, can you tell the jury how you came to be married to Jace Calder? Lena took a breath. I was sold. My father owed money to Garrick Voss. Voss offered to forgive the debt if my father gave him me. Then Voss added me to my husband's debt as a way to increase his leverage. There was a murmur in the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Brennan walked her through everything. The arrival at the homestead, the conditions, the impossible debt, the decision to break in and find evidence. Why did you do it? Brennan asked. Why risk everything? Because we were going to lose everything anyway. At least this way we had a chance to fight back, to show people what was really happening. Harrison's cross-examination was brutal. You admit you broke into Mr. Voss's home? Yes. You admit you stole his private documents? I took evidence of his crimes. That's not what I asked. Did you steal documents from his home? Yes. And you did this to avoid paying a debt you legally owed? I did it to expose fraud. But you did owe the debt, didn't you? Your husband signed a contract designed to be impossible to fulfill. That's for the court to decide, not you. All you decided was to commit a crime. It went on like that for an hour. Harrison trying to paint her as a criminal. Lena fighting to keep her composure, to tell the truth without letting him twist it. When she finally stepped down, she was shaking. Jace caught her eye from the gallery and nodded. You did good. Jace's testimony the next day was similar. Brennan walked him through his father's original loan, the death, the spiral into debt, the impossible situation. Harrison tried the same tactics. You failed to make payments, didn't you? I made every payment I could. But not every payment you owed. The interest made it impossible. Or perhaps you simply mismanaged your finances. Back and forth. Attack and defend. By the time Jay stepped down, Lena wanted to scream. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Experts testified about standard lending practices, about what constituted predatory lending. Accountants went through the numbers. Former Voss employees talked about being ordered to pressure debtors, to find ways to trigger penalty clauses. Voss himself took the stand in his own defense. He was smooth, confident, denied everything, said the contracts were standard, said people simply failed to live up to their obligations, said he was a businessman, not a criminal. Harrison's closing argument was polished. The prosecution wants you to believe that business success equals criminality. That's not justice. Yes, Mr. Voss is wealthy. Yes, he drives hard bargains, but that's not illegal. What is illegal is breaking into someone's home and stealing their property, which is exactly what the Calders did. Brennan's closing was more passionate. They want you to believe this is about business. It's not. It's about human decency. About whether we let powerful people destroy families for profit. The Calders broke the law. They admit it. But they did it because there was no other way to expose what was happening. Sometimes justice requires breaking rules. Sometimes courage means risking everything to do what's right. The jury got the case on a Friday afternoon. They deliberated through the weekend. Lena and Jace waited in their boarding house, unable to eat, unable to sleep. Everything they'd fought for came down to 12 strangers deciding what was true. On Monday morning, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. They filed into the courtroom. Lena's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Jace's hand found hers under the table. The judge asked the jury foreman to stand. Have you reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. In the matter of the territory versus Garrick Voss on the charge of fraud, how do you find? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Voss's face went white. His lawyers immediately started talking, filing motions. But the foreman wasn't done. On the charges of conspiracy, guilty. On the charges of predatory lending practices, guilty. Guilty on all counts. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. When the room finally quieted, he turned to Voss. Mr. Voss, you've been found guilty of serious crimes against the people of this territory. I'm remanding you to custody pending sentencing. Marshals moved forward, put Voss in chains, led him away. Then the judge turned to Lena and Jace. As for you two, you did break the law, but given the circumstances and given that your actions exposed widespread corruption, I'm not inclined to pursue charges. However, he fixed them with a stern look. Don't make a habit of it. Yes, Your Honor, they said in unison. Outside the courthouse, people crowded around them, families they'd never met thanking them, reporters shouting questions, Brennan grinning like he'd won the lottery. What happens now? Lena asked him. Now? Voss's assets get seized. His fraudulent contracts get voided. Everyone he forced out gets their land back or compensation. And you two? Brennan clapped Jace on the shoulder. You're free. The debt is erased. The land is yours. Lena looked at Jace. Free. After everything, they were actually free. They left the capital the next day, riding back toward their homestead. The journey that had seemed so desperate on the way there felt different now, lighter. When they crested the final ridge and saw their cabin in the valley below, Lena felt something she'd never really felt before. She felt home. The homestead looked different when they rode up that evening. Maybe it was just the light, late summer gold washing over everything, or maybe it was them. They'd left as fugitives and come back as something else, people who'd stood in a courtroom and won. Jace dismounted first and stood there for a long moment, just looking at the cabin, the barn, the fields. It's really ours now. No debt, no one coming to take it. Feels strange, doesn't it? Lena slid down from the horse, her legs stiff from the long ride. Like we should be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yeah. He turned to her. But maybe we can stop waiting. Maybe we can just live. They unpacked in silence, both of them exhausted down to the bone. The trial had taken everything out of them. 3 weeks of testimony, of being scrutinized and questioned and judged. But it was over. Voss was in prison awaiting sentencing, his empire being dismantled piece by piece. The territorial governor had ordered a full audit of all his holdings, and every fraudulent contract was being reviewed. That night they sat on the porch they'd rebuilt together, watching stars come out over land that was finally, legally, completely theirs. What do we do now? Lena asked. Jace was quiet for a while. We finish the harvest, get ready for winter. Then, maybe in spring, we expand. Buy some cattle if we can afford it. Plant more wheat. That sounds normal. It is normal. That's the whole point. He looked at her. We get to be normal now. No running, no hiding, no fighting, just living. Lena leaned against him. I don't know if I remember how to do normal. Me neither. But I want to learn. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that was almost meditative. They harvested the wheat, working from dawn until dark to get it in before any early frost could ruin it. The yield was better than either of them had expected. Not great by any measure, but enough to sell and actually have money for the first time in months. The Hendersons came over to help, bringing their 2 sons. Margaret taught Lena how to preserve vegetables for winter, showing her the tricks of canning and pickling that could make summer's bounty last through the cold months. You did a brave thing, Margaret said one afternoon. They were in the cabin, surrounded by jars and boiling water. Standing up to Voss like that. A lot of people wanted to, but you actually did it. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified the whole time. That's what brave is. Being terrified and doing it anyway. Margaret sealed another jar with practiced efficiency. My mother used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's fear walking forward. Lena thought about that while she worked. All those moments when she'd been so scared she could barely breathe. In the blizzard, saving the horse, breaking into Voss's house, testifying in court. She'd felt like she was falling apart, but she'd kept moving, kept fighting. Maybe that was enough. In September, a letter came from Brennan. Voss had been sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His assets were being liquidated, with the proceeds going to compensate the families he'd defrauded. It would take time. These things always did. But eventually, people would get something back. There was also a note at the bottom of the letter, almost an afterthought. Several newspapers want to interview you both. There's talk of you being heroes of the territory. Thought you should know. Heroes, Jace said, reading over Lena's shoulder. That's ridiculous. Is it, though? We exposed corruption, helped people get justice. We broke into a man's house and stole his papers because we were desperate and out of options. That's not heroic, that's just survival. Lena turned to look at him. Can it be both? He didn't have an answer for that. The newspaper reporters started showing up in October. First one, then another, then a whole parade of them wanting to hear the story firsthand. Lena and Jace tried to accommodate them at first, but it got exhausting. Every interview covering the same ground, everyone wanting to hear about the break-in, the trial, the verdict. Finally, Jace told the fifth reporter who showed up, Look, we appreciate the interest, but we're trying to build a life here. The story's over. We just want to be left alone now. The reporter, a young woman with sharp eyes and a notebook, nodded slowly. I understand, but you should know there are families all over the territory who are coming forward now because of what you did. People who were too scared before. Your story gave them courage. After she left, Lena found Jace in the barn, brushing down the horse with more force than necessary. You okay? She asked. I don't want to be an example. I don't want people looking up to us. We're just two people who got lucky and survived. Maybe that's exactly why they need the story. Because we're not special. We're just people who refuse to give up. Jace stopped brushing. You really believe that? I'm starting to. Winter came hard that year, but they were ready for it. The cabin was solid, the stores were full, and they had enough firewood to last until spring. The chickens roosted in the barn, and Jace had managed to trade some of their wheat for 2 young pigs that would provide meat through the cold months. It was still hard. Winter on the frontier was always hard, but it was different now. They weren't desperately rationing, weren't wondering if they'd survive until thaw. They were just living through winter like everyone else. On a particularly cold night in January, Lena woke to find Jace sitting by the fire, unable to sleep. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. Everything. He poked at the fire. I keep thinking about my father, about how he died trying to make this place work, and how he never got to see it succeed. Lena got up and sat beside him. He'd be proud of you. Would he? I broke the law. I married a woman I didn't choose. I nearly lost everything he worked for. But you didn't lose it. You saved it. You fought when you could have given up. That's what he would have wanted. Jace was quiet for a long time. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Voss had never made that deal. If he'd just taken the land like he could have. We never would have met. Yeah. Would that have been better? He looked at her then, really looked at her. No. Even with everything, the fear, the struggle, all of it, I wouldn't trade having you here. Lena kissed him, soft and slow. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. Could be worse. Could be better too. Don't push your luck. They sat by the fire until dawn, talking about nothing and everything, making plans for spring, arguing about what crops to plant, whether they could afford cattle, if they should build a bigger barn. Normal conversations, normal problems. It felt like a miracle. Spring arrived with mud and rain and the slow greening of the land. Lena planted a garden 3 times the size of last year's, full of vegetables and herbs, and even some flowers just because she wanted color. Jace worked on expanding the fields, preparing more ground for wheat and adding a section for oats. The Hendersons' eldest son, Daniel, started coming over regularly to help. He was 17, strong as an ox, and apparently had decided Jace was worth learning from. Jace grumbled about it, but Lena could tell he liked having the help. One afternoon in April, while Lena was weeding the garden, she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Her first instinct was fear, some leftover reflex from the months of being hunted. But when she looked up, she saw it was just travelers, a family in a covered wagon, looking lost and exhausted. The man driving the wagon called out, "Excuse me, ma'am, we're looking for the Calder place. Are we close?" "This is it," Lena said, standing up and brushing dirt from her hands. The man's face lit up. "You're Lena Calder, the one from the trial?" "Yes." She felt that familiar discomfort. "Can I help you?" The man climbed down from the wagon. He was middle-aged, thin, with the look of someone who'd been traveling hard. "My name is Robert Chen. This is my wife, Mary, and our 3 children. We lost our farm to a man doing the same thing Voss did. Different territory, but same tactics. When we heard what you and your husband did, how you fought back." He stopped, emotion choking his voice. "It gave us hope. We sold what we had left and came here, heard there was still open land in this territory, and we figured if people like you could make it work, maybe we could too." Lena looked at the wagon, at the tired woman and 3 small children peering out. "Where are you headed exactly?" "Anywhere we can file a claim, anywhere that'll have us." "There's unclaimed land about 5 miles north of here," Jace said. He'd come out of the barn, drawn by the voices. "Good water source, decent soil. Would need work, but it's available." Robert's eyes widened. "You'd help us, even though we're strangers?" "People helped us when we needed it. Seems fair to pass it on." They spent the next week helping the Chen family get established on their new claim. Jace and Daniel showed Robert how to build a basic shelter. Lena gave Mary seeds from their stores and taught her what she'd learned about gardening in this harsh climate. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Thank you," Mary said when they were leaving, "not just for the help, for showing it was possible." After they left, Lena turned to Jace. "That's going to keep happening, isn't it? People showing up because of the trial." "Probably. How do you feel about that?" Jace looked out at their fields, their cabin, the life they'd built from nothing. "I feel like we better get used to it." More families came through that spring and summer. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others, like the Chens, were looking for new starts after being driven out by men like Voss. Lena and Jace helped where they could. Advice, seeds, tools loaned out, and sometimes not returned. It strained their resources, but it also built something bigger. A community of people who'd all survived different versions of the same nightmare. By the end of summer, there were 6 new homesteads within 10 miles of theirs. They started having gatherings once a month. Nothing fancy, just people getting together to share food and news and help. It reminded Lena of stories she'd heard about barn raisings and quilting bees. Communities pulling together because that was the only way to survive. In August, Lena realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks but hadn't said anything, afraid to hope, afraid to jinx it. But when she finally told Jace, his reaction was everything she could have wanted, pure joy mixed with terror. "A baby," he said, like he was testing out the word. "We're going to have a baby." "Assuming everything goes well?" "It will. It has to." He pulled her close. "When?" "March, I think. Maybe late February. We need to prepare. A cradle. Baby clothes. We need to make sure the cabin's warm enough, and we should talk to Margaret. She's had kids. She'll know what to do." He was spiraling into planning mode. Lena laughed. "We have time." "Do we? Babies need things. A lot of things. And what if something goes wrong? The nearest doctor is 40 miles away. What if—" She put her hand over his mouth. "Stop. We'll figure it out. We always do." They spent the fall preparing. Jace built a cradle from wood he'd been saving for a special project. Lena sewed baby clothes from fabric Margaret gave her, teaching herself as she went, because she'd never made anything so small before. The community pitched in too. The Chens brought over a baby blanket. Daniel's mother contributed tiny knitted caps. The new family to the east gave them a stack of cloth diapers their own children had outgrown. Winter that year was easier. They had everything they needed and then some. The cabin was warm, the stores were full, and Lena was starting to show, her belly rounding out under her dresses. "You're beautiful," Jace said one night, his hand on her stomach. "I'm fat." "You're pregnant." "That's different." "Tell that to my back." He rubbed her lower back until she fell asleep, something he did every night now without being asked. In February, 3 weeks before the baby was due, a late blizzard hit. Not as bad as that first winter, but bad enough. They were snowed in for 4 days, and Lena spent most of it trying not to panic about the timing. "What if the baby comes during the storm?" she asked. "Then we deal with it. Margaret told you what to expect. I've helped animals give birth. We'll manage." Animals and people are different. Not as different as you'd think. The baby didn't come during the storm. Waited until a bright morning in early March when the snow was melting and the sun was warm. Lena's water broke while she was feeding the chickens. She barely made it back to the cabin before the contractions started in earnest. Jace rode for Margaret through mud and slush, making the 8 miles in record time. By the time they got back, Lena was in serious labor, gripping the bed frame and trying to breathe through waves of pain that seemed impossible to survive. "This is normal," Margaret said calmly, washing her hands. "I know it doesn't feel normal, but it is. You're doing fine." "I'm dying." "You're not dying. You're bringing a person into the world. It's supposed to hurt." It did hurt. More than anything Lena had ever experienced. The blizzard, the hunger, the fear, none of it compared to this. But Margaret talked her through it, step by step, and Jace held her hand and told her she was strong. She could do this. She'd survived worse. "I haven't survived worse," Lena gasped between contractions. "Yes, you have. You survived Voss. You survived the trial. You survived last winter. You can survive this." The baby came as the sun was setting, arriving with a cry that seemed impossibly loud for such a small creature. Margaret cleaned her up and wrapped her in the blanket the Chens had given them, then placed her in Lena's arms. "A girl," Margaret said, smiling. "Healthy. Perfect." Lena looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. Jay stood beside the bed, staring at his daughter with an expression of complete wonder. "We made this," he said softly. "We did." "What do we name her?" They discussed names but never settled on one. Now, holding her daughter, Lena knew. "Hope. We name her Hope." Jace's eyes were wet. Hope called her. "Yeah, that's perfect." The first few weeks with a newborn were chaos. Hope cried at all hours, needed constant feeding and changing, and seemed determined to never let her parents sleep. But she was theirs, this small, perfect person they'd brought into the world against all odds. The community rallied around them again. People brought food, offered to watch Hope for a few hours so Lena and Jace could rest, gave advice on everything from colic to teething. It was overwhelming and wonderful and exhausting all at once. One afternoon in April, Lena stood in the garden with Hope strapped to her chest in a sling Margaret had shown her how to make. She was planting seeds for the summer harvest, tomatoes and squash and beans. Hope was asleep, her small body warm against Lena's. Jace came up behind them. "Need help?" "I've got it, but you can keep me company." They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing each other well enough that words weren't always necessary. The sun was warm, the soil was rich, and their daughter slept peacefully between them. "You ever think about where we'd be if things had gone differently?" Lena asked. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Just wondering if I'd run instead of coming here. If you'd given up on the land. If we hadn't found that evidence, or if the trial had gone the other way." Jace planted a tomato seedling carefully. "We'd probably be dead, or scattered somewhere, living half lives. But we're not. We're here. Here is pretty good." "Yeah, it is." That summer, they hired Daniel Chen full-time to help with the expanded crops. He was saving money to file his own claim eventually, and Jace was teaching him everything he knew about farming this particular piece of stubborn land. The wheat harvest that year was the best they'd ever had, triple what they'd managed that first year. They sold most of it and used the money to buy 6 head of cattle and a better plow. The homestead was becoming a real ranch, slowly but steadily. In September, a letter came from the territorial governor's office. Voss had died in prison, a fight with another inmate over something stupid. The letter was just notification, nothing more. But it felt like the final chapter of a story that had defined their lives for so long. "He's dead," Lena said, reading the letter again. Jace was sitting on the porch with Hope on his lap, teaching her to clap. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction, but mostly I just feel nothing. He doesn't matter anymore. Whatever power he had over us, it's gone." "Yeah." Lena folded the letter and put it away. She didn't need to keep it, didn't need to remember him. That part of their lives was over. That winter was mild and they spent it planning for spring. Hope was walking now, toddling around the cabin and getting into everything. She had Jace's dark hair and Lena's stubborn determination, a combination that was both delightful and exhausting. One evening in February, almost exactly a year since Hope was born, Lena told Jace she was pregnant again. "Already?" he said, then immediately backtracked. I mean, that's wonderful. Amazing. I just thought we'd have more time. Apparently not. How do you feel about it? Tired, excited, terrified, all of it. He kissed her forehead. We'll figure it out. We always do. Their son was born in October, arriving fast and easy compared to Hope. They named him Thomas, after Jace's father. He was quieter than Hope had been, more content to just observe the world around him. The homestead continued to grow, more land cleared and planted, more cattle, a bigger barn. Jace and Daniel built a proper chicken coop that winter, and in spring they added sheep to the operation. It wasn't luxury living, but it was comfortable, secure. Over the years, the settlement around them grew too. More families came, drawn by the railroad that eventually did come through, just like Voss had planned. The difference was, the land was owned by the people working it, not by one man collecting debts. A town formed about 3 miles from their homestead. At first, just a trading post and a church, then a school, a general store, a saloon. They named it Bridger's Landing, after the creek and the settlement where the deputy had helped them escape. Lena and Jace became unofficial leaders of the community, though neither of them wanted the role. People just naturally came to them with problems, looking for advice or help. They'd become the story people told about surviving and thriving despite impossible odds. Hope grew into a wild, fearless child who preferred working in the barn with her father to anything domestic. Thomas was quieter, more thoughtful, happiest when he was reading or helping his mother in the garden. They were different, but both completely loved. In the spring, when Hope was 7 and Thomas was 5, a young couple showed up at their door. They were running from debt collectors, the same kind of predatory contract that had nearly destroyed Lena and Jace. "We heard about what you did," the young woman said, "how you fought back. We were hoping, we don't know what to do." Lena looked at Jace. They'd been here before. They knew this story. "Come inside," Lena said. "Let's talk." They spent the evening going over the couple's contract, helping them understand their options. It wasn't as bad as what Voss had done, but it was still designed to fail. The next morning, Jace rode into town and came back with Brennan, who was now a full partner in a law firm and still took cases like this. "We'll fight it," Brennan said after reviewing the documents. "The laws have changed since the Voss trial. Creditors have to follow stricter rules now. This contract won't hold up." The young couple thanked them with tears in their eyes. After they left, Hope asked, "Why do people keep coming here?" "Because sometimes people need help," Lena said, "and sometimes the people who can help are the ones who remember what it's like to need it." "Were you scared when you fought the bad man?" Lena thought about it. "Yes, I was terrified." "But you did it anyway." "Yes, that's brave." "I suppose it is." Hope nodded seriously, processing this. At 7, she was already showing signs of the same stubborn courage that had kept her parents alive. It scared Lena sometimes, knowing her daughter might inherit not just their land but their willingness to fight for what was right. But it also made her proud. The years passed. Hope and Thomas grew. The ranch prospered. Lena and Jace got older, the hard work of frontier life leaving its marks on both of them. Gray hair, weathered skin, hands scarred from decades of labor. But they'd built something. A home, a family, a community. The land that had almost killed them became the land that sustained them. On a summer evening when Lena was 52 and Jace was 55, they sat on the porch of the house they'd expanded over the years. It was bigger now, with real glass windows and a second story where Hope's children, 2 boys and a girl, were sleeping. Thomas lived in town, running the general store with his wife, but he came by every Sunday for dinner. "You ever regret it?" Jace asked. "How we started? What we went through?" Lena thought about it. The cold, the hunger, the fear, the desperate gamble that could have ended with both of them dead. "No," she said finally, "I wouldn't change it. All of it, every terrible moment, led to this. To us. To them." She gestured at the house, where their family slept safe and warm. "Me neither." Jace took her hand. After 30 years, his touch was still familiar, still comforting. "We did good, didn't we?" "Yeah, we did." The sun set over the valley, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The wheat fields they'd planted together swayed in the evening breeze. Cattle grazed in pastures that had once been barren ground. and in the distance, smoke rose from the chimneys of a dozen homesteads, each one a family making their own way, building their own lives. This was their legacy, not the trial or the headlines or the story people told. This, the land, the community, the proof that even when the world tried to break you, you could choose to build something instead. Lena leaned against Jace's shoulder, watching the light fade. Somewhere inside, one of the grandchildren laughed at something, the sound carrying through the open windows. Hope was singing to them, probably the same lullaby Lena had sung to her all those years ago. They'd come to this frontier as strangers, forced together by cruelty and circumstance. Two people discarded by the world, given nothing but impossible odds and frozen ground. But they'd refused to break, refused to give up, refused to let the harsh land or harsh men define what their lives would be. And in refusing, they'd built something that would last long after they were gone. The stars came out, bright and endless above the valley. Jace's hand tightened on hers. "Ready to go in?" he asked. "In a minute. I just want to sit here a little longer." "All right, I'm not going anywhere." "I know." They sat together as night fell over the land they'd fought for, died for, and finally claimed as their own. Two people who'd survived winter and emerged into spring. Two people who'd turned cruelty into love and desperation into hope. The frontier had tried to destroy them. Instead, they'd made it home. And that, Lena thought, was the greatest victory of all.